Family means nothing when everyone is looking at you. The voice was muffled through 2 inches of solid oak, but the words cut like a straight razor. Then came the sound. A heavy metallic scrape followed by a sharp, dry snap. The deadbolt. To a civilian, it was just a door locking. To the ears of a Marine Corps captain, that exact pitch and frequency sounded identical to the racking of a slide on a Glock 19. A round entering the chamber, aimed right at my chest. I stood frozen on the concrete porch. The late afternoon Virginia sun beat down on my shoulders, baking the dark fabric of my uniform. The air smelled of hot asphalt and fresh-cut grass. Normalcy. A disgusting, suffocating normalcy. In my left hand, a single sheet of paper fluttered slightly in the breeze. A preliminary investigation notice from the Criminal Investigation Division. Missing ordnance, missing funds. An inquiry, not an indictment. There was no arrest warrant, no court-martial scheduled, no guilty verdict. But in this zip code, in this neighborhood of manicured lawns and leased luxury cars, an inquiry was enough. Arthur Cole did not need a judge to hand down a death sentence to his own blood. He just needed the whisper of a defense contractor to protect his fragile country club reputation. I did not pound my fists against the wood. I did not scream for my father to open the door. Begging was a civilian luxury, and I bled out that weakness years ago in the sandbox. I took a slow, deliberate step back. My boots scraped against the brick. Through the front bay window, a shadow shifted. Evelyn, my stepmother. Her wide, panicked eyes met mine through the glass for a fraction of a second. She flinched as if she had been caught staring at a stray dog with rabies. Her hand shot up, grabbing the cord, and yanked the heavy striped blinds shut. The plastic slats clattered together, sealing the house. Total quarantine. Down the street, the roar of a riding lawnmower died. The neighbor, a man who waved at me during Thanksgiving dinner, stood perfectly still in his driveway, wiping sweat from his forehead with a dirty rag. His eyes were glued to my porch, waiting for the breakdown. My heart rate spiked to 90. I forced it down. Inhale for 4 seconds. Hold for 4. Exhale for 4. Hold for 4. The sniper's breath. I turned my back to the oak door. Shoulders back, spine straight. I set my stride to a regulation 30-inch step. My boot heels struck the concrete walkway with a rhythmic hollow thud. 1, 2, 1, 2. I walked down that driveway the exact same way I used to walk out of a cleared compound in Al Anbar. No sudden movements, no exposed flanks. I refused to leave a single crack in my armor for the neighborhood to feed their pity through. My vehicle was parked by the curb. A battered 2008 Ford Explorer. I pulled the heavy handle, climbed into the driver's seat, and slammed the door. I hit the master lock button. All 4 locks snapped down simultaneously. A mobile trench made of cheap plastic, stale air, and rust. The cabin was an oven. The smell of baking vinyl mixed with the sour stench of the broken air conditioning unit. I did not turn the key in the ignition. I just sat there in the sweltering heat, staring at the steering wheel. The silence inside the truck was absolute, pressing against my eardrums. 8 years. 8 years ago, Arthur Cole sat at a kitchen table, surrounded by foreclosure notices, his hands shaking so violently he could not hold his coffee mug. His roofing business was bankrupt. His heart was failing from years of cheap scotch and bad debt. The surgeries were going to strip him of the house, the cars, the image he worshipped so deeply. I was 26. I packed a sea bag and volunteered for 3 consecutive combat deployments. Fallujah, Ramadi, Helmand. I traded my 20s for hazard pay. I lived in dirt, ate dust, and packed chest wounds with gauze while mortars shook the earth. Every single dollar, every blood-soaked paycheck I wired back to that house to keep the bank off his back. I bought his life with my survival. And today, he chose the rumors of a corrupt local defense contractor over the daughter he used to carry on his shoulders. He chose the golf course over blood. The emptiness in my chest was expanding, a cold vacuum, threatening to cave my ribs inward. My right hand dropped to my knee. Through the fabric of my trousers, I found the jagged scar where shrapnel had torn through my flesh. I dug my right thumb hard into the scar tissue. I pressed until the physical pain flared white-hot, shooting up my thigh. Pain is an anchor. Pain overrides the hollow ache of betrayal. I welcomed the burn. The interior of the Ford grew dark as the sun finally dipped below the manicured tree line of the suburban subdivision. Deep in the pocket of my uniform jacket, my phone began to vibrate, a relentless mechanical buzzing against my ribs. I pulled it out. The screen cast a harsh, sickly blue light across the dark cabin, illuminating the dashboard and the calluses on my knuckles. I swiped the screen. The Instagram application opened instantly. Arthur Cole had just updated his status. He did not post a picture of me. He did not post a picture of himself. It was just a blank screen. Below it there was a caption, 5 short, sterile words. She is no longer my daughter. I stared at the glowing pixels. I watched the notification counter at the bottom of the screen. Relatives I loaned money to, neighbors I helped, friends of his who drank my liquor at his birthday parties, they were double tapping the post. The likes ticked upward in real time. 10, 20, 35. A public stoning in the digital age. My erasure was being validated, approved by the very people whose lives I had subsidized. As I sat there watching my bloodline publicly sever me, I realized something about pain. It is universal. If you have ever felt the cold sting of family betrayal, hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and leave the comment, betrayed. Tell me where you are listening to this and what time it is in your part of the world. We are not alone in this trench. I did not type a response. I did not defend my honor. I pressed the power button, plunging the cabin back into absolute darkness. I tossed the glass and metal rectangle onto the passenger seat. The silence rushed back in heavier than before. The soldier in me had survived the desert, but the daughter died in that driveway. At 0700 hours, the United States military did not put me against a wall in front of a firing squad. They did something much worse. They put me in a windowless room next to a heavy-duty copy machine. Administrative isolation. It is the sterile, bloodless way the system breaks a human spirit. There is no official guilty verdict. You are simply erased from the operational board. Guilty until proven innocent. Yesterday, I was a captain coordinating millions of dollars in tactical logistics, moving high-explosive ordnance across hostile borders. Today, I'm sitting at a fake wood laminate desk, aligning the edges of blank personnel forms and driving a metal staple through the top left corner. The fluorescent tubes above my head flickered. They emitted a constant high-pitched buzzing sound that drilled directly into the base of my skull. The air in the room was dead, smelling of ozone, heated plastic, and dry toner ink. It was the smell of a career rotting in real time. I did not slouch. I sat with my spine perfectly straight, maintaining the exact posture I would use while briefing a general officer. My boots were polished, my uniform was pressed. I locked all my exhaustion deep inside my chest cavity. I counted my breathing. Inhale for 4. Hold for 4. Exhale for 4. The enemy wants to see you break. You do not give them the satisfaction. The metal door handle clicked. The heavy fire door pulled open just enough to let a sliver of hallway light cut across the linoleum floor. First, Lieutenant Miller slipped into the room. He needed paper from the supply closet behind the copy machine. 3 months ago, Miller botched a logistical requisition form so badly it would have triggered a federal audit and ended his career before it started. I sat with him until 3 a.m. in the motor pool office, drinking stale water and rewriting his garbage report line by line so he would not face a disciplinary board. Today, Miller did not look at my face. His eyes were glued firmly to the scuff marks on the toes of his boots. He walked with stiff, hurried steps, keeping his body angled toward the wall to maximize the physical distance between us. He reached the supply shelf, grabbed a ream of printer paper, and clutched it to his chest like a ballistic shield. "Morning, Captain," he mumbled to the floorboards. His voice was hollow, thin. He spun around and power-walked back toward the door. He moved as if he was afraid that standing in my proximity for more than 10 seconds would infect him with whatever terminal disease the brass had stamped on my file. The door clicked shut behind him, sealing me back in the humming silence. I did not feel anger toward the lieutenant. Anger is a tactical flaw. I only felt a cold, clinical understanding. This was the basic survival instinct of the corporate military structure. When a ship is taking on water, the rats do not try to patch the hole. They swim away from the drowning. Miller was just a rat protecting his dry uniform. I drove another metal staple through another stack of meaningless paper. 10 minutes later, the heavy door did not just click open. It was shoved inward with enough force to bang against the rubber wall stopper. A brown paper bag heavily stained with grease flew across the room and landed on my desk with a wet, heavy thud. It slid 3 inches and stopped right next to my stapler. Gunnery Sergeant Elena Torres dragged a cheap plastic chair across the floor. The metal legs shrieked against the linoleum. Elena did not do polite. She was a Hispanic woman from the south side of Chicago who had survived 20 years in the artillery division by being louder and meaner than the men she commanded. She did not bring soft words. She did not bring fake sympathy. She slammed a large styrofoam cup of black coffee down next to the greasy bag. Some of the dark liquid splashed out through the plastic lid, staining the white paper of my forms. Elena dropped her heavy frame into the plastic chair. She did not look at me with pity. She looked at me the exact same way she looked at a jammed rifle mechanism. Annoyed, but ready to fix it. "Eat the damn food," Elena ordered, her voice gravelly and rough. "You look like a walking corpse." 1, 2. She reached into her own paper bag, pulled out a massive foil-wrapped burger, and immediately began pulling the raw red onions out from under the bun. She tossed the onions onto the desk wrapper. Her loyalty was not measured in tears or hugs. It was measured by the simple, defiant act of sitting in a glass-walled hallway, eating lunch with an officer currently under federal investigation. In this building, that was an act of open rebellion. I reached for the styrofoam cup. The heat of the black coffee seeped through the cheap material, warming the calluses on my palms. I brought the rim toward my mouth. Elena took a massive bite of her burger. She chewed loudly, her eyes fixed on the blinking green light of the copy machine. She did not look at me when she spoke. She delivered the information with the casual, brutal efficiency of an artillery strike. "That local charity fundraiser event last month," Elena said, her mouth half full. "The one all the local business owners attended. Victor Vance was there." My fingers tightened slightly around the cup. "Vance stuck to your father like wet mud." Elena continued, swallowing hard. "He bought a table right next to Arthur Cole. And he did not just buy him dinner. Vance brought a gift, a bottle of Macallan Scotch, 25 years old. They sat at that table drinking from the same bottle, laughing until the place shut down at midnight." My hand stopped moving. The styrofoam cup hovered exactly 2 inches from my lips. I stared down at the black surface of the coffee. A microscopic tremor in my wrist caused the dark liquid to ripple in concentric circles. Victor Vance, the defense contractor who started the rumors about the missing ordnance. The man who pointed the finger at me, drinking a $2,000 bottle of scotch with my father. The pieces of the puzzle slammed together with a deafening crash inside my skull. Arthur Cole did not lock his door yesterday because he was afraid of a scandal. He locked his door because he was already bought and paid for. The pupils of my eyes contracted. The heavy, suffocating weight of administrative isolation vanished from my chest. The instinct to endure to survive the punishment completely shut down. The cold, calculating machinery of a combat tactician booted up in its place. I lowered the coffee cup to the desk. I did not take a sip. I did not need caffeine anymore. I had a target. 11 at night. The apartment was completely pitch black. I sat on the edge of the cheap fabric sofa, staring straight ahead into the dark. I did not turn on the overhead lamp. I did not switch on the television to drown out the silence. In a combat zone, you learn to let your eyes adjust to the darkness. You never flood a room with artificial light because light blinds you to the shadows. It ruins your night vision. It makes you an easy target. Tonight, I was not the target anymore. I was operating in the dark. I was gathering intel. The only sound in the dead, empty space of my living room was the refrigerator compressor in the galley kitchen. It ran with a low, vibrating rattle, a cheap appliance struggling to keep a few bottles of tap water cold. I held my phone in my right hand. My thumb moved across the glass screen in a slow, rhythmic swipe. The skin on that thumb was thick. It was heavily calloused from years of gripping rough polymer pistol grips and pulling steel charging handles. Now it was just scrolling, digging through the digital sludge of the people who shared my last name. The blue light from the screen cast a harsh, unnatural glow across my face. It illuminated the rigid line of my jaw and the hollows of my cheeks. I felt nothing. The crushing weight of the afternoon, the locked door, the drawn blinds, the isolation had burned off hours ago. What remained was a cold, clinical need for data. I was tracking the enemy. My calloused thumb stopped moving. The screen froze on a single image. It hit me right in the center of my chest, sharper and cleaner than any piece of shrapnel ever could. It was a post from Evelyn's account. My stepmother, the woman who had yanked the window blinds shut yesterday, like I was a diseased animal trespassing on her lawn. The photograph was high definition, perfect overhead lighting, a cozy, intimate shot of a private booth at the most expensive local steakhouse downtown. 4 people sat around the heavy mahogany wood table. There was Arthur, his face flushed red from alcohol, a wide, toothy grin plastered across his face. Beside him sat my younger brother, Mason. Mason was wearing a cheap blazer that did not fit his shoulders, looking slick and desperately satisfied, holding up a heavy glass of amber liquid. Evelyn leaned in from the edge of the frame, showing off her veneered teeth. And sitting right in the center, with one heavy arm draped casually over my father's shoulder, was Victor Vance, the defense contractor. The man who had quietly fed the military investigators the lie that I was skimming logistics funds and stealing ordnance. I stared at the screen. I pinched the glass and zoomed in. I examined the details of the image with the detached, dead-eyed precision of a sniper reading the wind. I looked at the bottle sitting in the center of the table. Macallan, 25 years old. The exact bottle Gunny Torres had warned me about this morning. Below the image, Evelyn had typed a caption. Real family always stands together. It was a masterpiece of suburban optics, a perfectly staged piece of visual propaganda. It was a public declaration to the local country club crowd, to the defense contractors, to the good old boy network of Virginia. It told everyone that Arthur Cole had cut the cancer out of his life. He had severed ties with his disgraced daughter and pledged his absolute loyalty to Victor Vance. My breathing stopped, just for a single beat. My chest did not heave. My eyes remained completely dry. There was no lump of sorrow forming in my throat. I did not feel the urge to scream or cry or hurl the phone against the drywall. That kind of emotional breakdown is for people who think there is still something left to save. Instead, the tight, suffocating knot inside my ribs simply dissolved. It vanished, replaced by a wave of absolute freezing clarity. I had it all wrong. Arthur did not lock the front door yesterday because he was afraid of a neighborhood scandal. He did not lock me out because he panicked or because he was embarrassed by the military investigation. He locked the door because he was getting paid. I was not a victim of a tragic family misunderstanding. I was collateral. I was the entry fee. My father had traded my military career, my honor, and my freedom just to secure his own seat at Victor Vance's table. He used his daughter's public execution as a networking opportunity to wipe out his debts. I sat there in the blue light, remembering the heat of Al Anbar. I remembered throwing my body weight over a terrified civilian in a dusty alleyway while heavy machine gun fire chewed up the brick wall above our heads. I bled for total strangers in the dirt. I wired every hazard paycheck back to this town to keep the bank from taking Arthur's roof, and he sold me out for a free steak and a glass of scotch. I pressed the power button on the side of the phone. The blue light died instantly. The apartment plunged back into pitch-black darkness. I tossed the phone. It landed softly on the empty cushion next to me. I placed my hands flat on my knees and pushed myself up from the sofa. I stood at the center of the living room and rolled my shoulders back. The joints in my neck and spine popped. It was a dry, cracking sound echoing in the quiet room. The civilian patience was dead. The good daughter who stood on the concrete porch and took the punishment was gone. I was done waiting for the military bureaucracy to clear my name. I was done trying to survive the isolation of an administrative desk. If they wanted to treat me like a criminal, I would stop acting like a victim. I would operate the way the Marine Corps trained me to operate. You do not attack a fortified bunker from the front. You look for the structural weakness. You look for the coward in the ranks. You find the guy who breaks under pressure. Arthur was too arrogant. Victor Vance was too insulated. But Mason, my younger brother, a local mechanic drowning in credit card debt and mortgage past due notices, a 30-year-old boy who hid behind our father's shadow and desperately wanted to play in the big leagues. Mason was soft. Mason was a civilian. He did not know how to hold a secret when the pressure dropped. I walked into the dark bedroom. I reached out and grabbed my worn leather jacket off the back of the door. Tomorrow morning, Mason Cole was going to talk. Exactly 1200 hours, high noon. The industrial park on the edge of town was mostly abandoned, a graveyard of failing blue-collar businesses. The heavy aluminum bay door of Mason's auto repair shop was only pulled halfway up. I ducked my head, stepped under the sharp metal edge, and walked into the garage. The air inside was thick and unbreathable. It smelled of burnt motor oil, cheap exhaust fluid, and stale beer. Dust motes danced in the single shaft of sunlight cutting through the half-open door. I stood perfectly still just inside the threshold, a dark silhouette backlit by the midday sun. Mason was buried waist-deep under the popped hood of an oxidized Ford pickup. He was cursing loudly, yanking on a rusted alternator bracket. He wiped his greasy hands on a shop rag, turned his head, and saw me standing there. He flinched, hard. A heavy steel wrench slipped from his fingers. It hit the concrete floor with a loud hollow clank that echoed off the cinder block walls. He scrambled backward, bumping his spine against the grill of the truck. His eyes darted toward the side exit, then back to my face. The slick, arrogant confidence from the steakhouse photo the night before was completely gone. He looked exactly like what he was, a terrified 30-year-old boy drowning in credit card debt. "Bella," he stammered, rubbing the back of his neck with a dirty hand. He forced a weak, crooked smile. "Listen, I am swamped right now. Got a customer coming in 10 minutes to pick up this rig. We can talk later, okay?" Dad told me. I ignored him. I did not say a word. I took 3 steps to the right, raised my arm, and slammed the heel of my palm into the large red button mounted on the cinder block wall. The industrial chain drive groaned. The heavy metal bay door rattled and shrieked as it rolled downward. The shaft of sunlight vanished. The door hit the concrete floor with a heavy vibrating boom. The lock engaged. Total containment. No exit. Mason swallowed hard. His Adam's apple bobbed in his throat. A thin layer of cold sweat broke out across his forehead, making the grease smudges on his skin look like war paint melting off a coward. I closed the distance. I backed him up against the front bumper of the Ford. Less than 2 feet of space between us. In close quarters, combat proximity is power. You step into their physical space and suffocate their ability to think. "Were you at the fuel depot last Thursday?" I asked. My voice was flat. No elevation in pitch, no anger, just a tactical strike. "What?" "No." Mason shook his head too fast. His eyes were wide, darting from my left shoulder to my right. "I do not know what you are talking about. I was here. I was working." I locked my eyes onto his. Military CID pulled the gate security footage. The cameras scanned the license plate on your tow truck. You were running in tandem with Victor Vance's logistics transport. It was a bluff. An absolute lie. The Criminal Investigation Division did not have that footage yet. If they did, I would already be in a cell. But Mason was soft. He had never been interrogated by anyone harder than a local traffic cop. To a weak man hiding a dirty secret, a cold, confident statement of fact is a death sentence. His breathing turned shallow and rapid. The color completely drained from his face, leaving his skin a sickly, pale gray. His knees gave out. He slid down the chrome bumper of the Ford and hit the concrete floor with a heavy thud. He pulled his knees up to his chest and buried his face in his greasy hands. "I had no choice." Mason gasped, his voice cracked, high-pitched and pathetic. The bank sent the 3rd notice on the house. The mortgage was 90 days past due. They were going to take the shop, Bella. Vance came around. He said he just needed me to haul some surplus inventory, stuff the military was going to scrap anyway. He said nobody would ever notice. I stared down at the top of his head. I did not feel an ounce of pity. When we were kids, I used to carry him on my back to school when it snowed. I used to skip dinner so he could have the last piece of chicken. And here he was whining about a mortgage while my entire life was being fed into a wood chipper to cover his tracks. "You hauled stolen federal ordnance." I stated the words, dropping like stones on the concrete. And when the brass noticed the missing inventory, Vance pointed the finger at me. He needed a high-ranking scapegoat with access, and you let him do it. Mason looked up. His eyes were wet, bloodshot, and pleading. He was searching my face for the big sister who always fixed his messes. He found nothing but a blank wall. Then he opened his mouth and delivered the kill shot. I did not know what else to do. Mason choked out tears, cutting clean tracks through the grease on his cheeks. Dad said it was the only way to keep the family afloat. He said, "You are a Marine." He said, "You are tough. You are built for this kind of heat. You can handle the fallout." He said, "You have military lawyers who will get you off with a slap on the wrist. We do not have anyone, Bella." My eyes went pitch black. My heart rate did not spike. It actually slowed down. The block of ice inside my chest expanded, freezing the blood in my veins. It was the ultimate sickening paradox of being the strong one in a weak bloodline. They did not misunderstand me. They knew exactly who I was. They knew I was innocent, and they threw me to the wolves precisely because of my strength. They weaponized my resilience. They decided that because I could survive the pain, I was obligated to carry their sins. I looked down at the shivering, pathetic man sitting in the oil stains. "I am a soldier, Mason," I said. My voice was a low, heavy rasp, vibrating with pure, lethal intent. "I am not your meat shield." I reached down, grabbed the front of his oil-stained work shirt, and ripped the cell phone out of his breast pocket. He did not even try to stop me. I turned my back to him, hit the wall button, and ducked under the heavy metal door as it rolled upward. I walked out into the blinding sunlight, gripping the digital evidence tight in my hand. Next stop, the Criminal Investigation Division. Wednesday morning, 0800 hours. My cell phone vibrated against the cheap wood laminate of my administrative desk. A single text message from Gunnery Sergeant Elena Torres glowed on the screen. "They put Victor Vance in cuffs at 0600, Federal Sweep." Mason broke. He handed over the logistics logs, the text threads, the bank transfers. The house of cards collapsed overnight. By 0900, the atmospheric pressure in the administrative hallway shifted. The heavy fire door was propped wide open. The isolation protocol was silently lifted. First Lieutenant Miller walked into the room. He did not look at his boots today. He walked with his shoulders pushed back, wearing a nervous, overly eager smile. He carried 2 cups of premium dark roast coffee from the expensive off-base shop. "Morning, Captain," Miller said. His voice was too loud, echoing off the cinder block walls. "I heard the news from CID. We all knew those rumors were garbage. I brought you a coffee. Figured you could use it." I did not stop typing. I did not pull my eyes away from the harsh glare of the computer monitor. My fingers hit the plastic keys with rhythmic mechanical precision. "Put it in the trash can, Lieutenant," I commanded. My voice was completely flat, devoid of any emotional fluctuation. "And close the fire door on your way out. You are disrupting my operational focus." Miller froze. The fake sycophantic smile died instantly on his face. He nodded with stiff, jerky movements, set the coffee on the floor near the trash, and retreated. The heavy door clicked shut. The fluorescent tubes resumed their high-pitched buzzing. I went back to typing my quarterly logistics report. The absolute indifference was the hardest tactical strike I could deliver. I did not need their validation today any more than I needed their pity yesterday. Across town, a white United States Postal Service truck idled at the curb in front of a manicured lawn. Arthur Cole opened his solid oak front door. He wore a crisp tailored golf polo and expensive khaki slacks. He looked exactly like a man who had successfully secured his place in the local upper-class hierarchy. The mail carrier held out a black electronic pad. "Certified mail, Mr. Cole. Signature required." Arthur took the plastic stylus. He signed his name with a wide, arrogant flourish. The carrier handed him a thick, rigid cardboard envelope. The return address was stamped in a bold, unyielding, black-ink Department of Defense, Command Headquarters. Arthur closed the heavy oak door. He stood alone in his foyer, bathed in the soft light of a crystal chandelier. A smug, deeply satisfied smirk spread across his aging face. He ran his thumb over the heavy seal. In his arrogant mind, he already knew what was inside. It was the final nail in the coffin. A formal notice of dishonorable discharge. A document proving his disgraced daughter was being stripped of her rank. It was the exact piece of paper he needed to prove to his country club associates that he made the right choice by cutting the cancer out of his life. He was the tragic victim of a bad seed. He gripped the edge of the rigid cardboard. He pulled the red nylon tear string. It ripped through the heavy paper with a loud, aggressive sound. He reached inside and pulled out a single sheet of heavy stock parchment. He adjusted his gold-rimmed reading glasses on the bridge of his nose. It was not a court-martial summons. It was a formal letter of exoneration. Arthur blinked. His eyes scanned the heavy black text. The military jargon did not make sense to his civilian brain at first. Cleared of all suspicion. Exemplary conduct under pressure. Commendation for protecting federal evidence and exposing a civilian corruption ring. Attached to the back of the parchment was a carbon copy of a Department of Justice federal indictment. The primary target printed at the top, Victor Vance. The blood drained completely out of Arthur's face. His jaw went slack. Victor Vance was not the untouchable kingmaker of the local defense network anymore. He was a federal inmate facing 20 years in a maximum security penitentiary. And Arthur Cole, in his desperate, pathetic scramble for social status, had publicly kissed the ring of a jailed felon. The reality of his situation crashed down on him like a collapsing roof. To secure his seat next to that felon, Arthur had locked his door on a decorated military officer. He had publicly disowned a hero on the internet to serve as a loyal attack dog for a thief. His smug confidence evaporated. It was replaced by a cold, suffocating terror. The social circle he worshipped was going to rip him to shreds. The neighbors who liked his Instagram post were going to turn on him. He was going to be the ultimate laughingstock of the county. Arthur's hands began to shake. The violent tremors started in his knuckles and traveled rapidly up his forearms. His liver-spotted fingers lost their grip. The heavy stock parchment slipped from his hands. It fluttered through the quiet air and landed softly on the expensive Persian rug. Arthur dropped to his knees. His chest heaved as he gasped for oxygen in the empty, silent hallway. The sun finally went down. My apartment was quiet. I sat in the armchair by the window, wearing a faded gray sweatshirt. I had my legs crossed. I held a heavy glass of ice water in my right hand. The condensation dripped down the smooth side of the glass, pooling on my calloused knuckles. On the wooden coffee table, my cell phone lit up. The screen glowed stark white in the dim room. Incoming call, Arthur Cole. I watched the screen vibrate and ring until it went dark. 5 seconds later, it lit up again. Incoming call, Arthur Cole. He called 1 time, 5 times, 12 times. I did not reach for the device. I did not flip the switch to silence it. I just sat in the dark and watched the screen flash, tracking the desperate, pathetic rhythm of a man whose entire fake reality had just burned to the ground. A digital notification popped up on the glass. 3 new voicemails. I leaned forward. I tapped the speaker icon with my index finger. The audio filled the quiet room. It was not the sharp, arrogant voice that had told me family meant nothing through a locked door. It was the sound of a broken, panicking old man. "Bella, please pick up the phone." The audio crackled with heavy, wet breathing. "I got a letter today. From the military command. I did not know, sweetheart. I swear to God I did not know Victor was using Mason. You have to believe me. Please, call your father back. We need to fix this. I need you." A few weeks ago, I stood on his concrete porch absorbing the brutal strike of his deadbolt. I would have given absolutely anything for him to open that door. Now the power dynamic was completely reversed. He was the one begging in the dark. I took a slow sip of the ice water. The cold liquid slid down my throat. I did not feel a sudden rush of victory. I did not feel burning anger. I felt a hollow, absolute indifference. The man crying on the speakerphone was a total stranger. I set the glass down on the wooden table. The ice clinked sharply against the glass. Tomorrow was Saturday. The local veterans' breakfast was scheduled at the town church. The entire neighborhood would be in that hall. Arthur would be there desperately trying to save face and spin the narrative. I reached out and pressed the red delete button on the screen. The voicemail vanished. Tomorrow I would execute the final strike on his home turf. Saturday morning, 0900 hours. The local community church hall smelled of burnt drip coffee, cheap processed sausage links, and thick, sticky pancake syrup. It was the monthly veterans' breakfast. The large room was packed wall to wall with the town's older generation. They leaned over cheap plastic folding tables, scraping heavy steel forks against thick porcelain plates. The air was filled with a low, constant hum of suburban gossip. I pushed through the heavy wooden double doors. I was not wearing my dress uniform. I wore my faded brown leather jacket, the one with the frayed cuffs and scuffed elbows. The moment my heavy boots hit the linoleum floor, the noise died. It did not fade out slowly. It stopped dead. The scraping of silverware ceased completely. Dozens of eyes snapped away from their plates and locked directly onto me. The crowd parted. Men and women stepped backward, dragging their plastic chairs out of the way, clearing a wide, direct path to the center of the hall. They did not look at me with pity. They did not look at me with suspicion. They looked at me the way raw infantry recruits look at a combat commander walking the line. They knew. The federal indictment of Victor Vance had hit the front page of the local newspaper at dawn. My official exoneration was public record. The scapegoat was actually the one holding the leash. Arthur Cole was standing near the large stainless steel coffee urns at the far end of the room. He saw me. The color drained entirely from his face, leaving his skin the color of wet cigarette ash. He abandoned his styrofoam cup on the table and scrambled toward me. His shoulders were hunched forward. The slick, arrogant country club posture from the steakhouse photograph was completely gone. He looked incredibly small, pathetic, old. "Bella," he hissed. He kept his voice low, desperately trying to contain the blast radius of his own humiliation. His hands were shaking violently at his sides. "Please, let us go outside. We need to talk in private. I just want to protect the family name. People are staring." I stood perfectly straight. I did not drop my volume. I projected my voice from my chest, addressing him the same way I would address a subordinate who broke protocol. "You protected your name by locking your daughter out in the cold," I said. My words were sharp and heavy, echoing clearly off the high vaulted ceiling of the church. "That is cowardice." Arthur flinched as if I had physically struck him across the jaw. He looked around wildly at the silent, staring faces of his neighbors. At the folding table directly to his left, an elderly woman pushed her chair back. The plastic legs scraped loudly against the floor. Martha Higgins, 82 years old. Former Army combat nurse, 3 tours of duty in Vietnam. She wore a faded olive green garrison cap pinned to her white hair. She did not stand up. She did not raise her voice. She did not have to. Martha raised her steel fork and pointed the sharp prongs directly at Arthur's chest. "Do not ask her to save your face, Private," Martha growled. Her voice was pure gravel, ruined by years of inhaling helicopter exhaust and cheap tobacco. The word "private" dropped onto the linoleum like a 50-pound anvil. It stripped Arthur of his age. It stripped him of his fatherhood. It completely obliterated his patriarchal ego. It reduced him to the lowest possible rank in a room full of people who understood exactly what that title meant. He swallowed hard, his Adam's apple bobbing nervously in his throat. I reached deep into the pocket of my leather jacket and pulled out my cell phone. I unlocked the screen and opened the Instagram application. I pulled up his profile. I brought up the picture of him smiling with Victor Vance, the post with the 5 sterile words he used to publicly execute my character 4 days ago. I stepped forward and shoved the glowing glass screen inches from his pale face. "You put the lie in writing," I ordered. "Now you type the truth." Arthur stared at the harsh light of the screen. He looked up at me, his eyes wide, watery, and pleading. I did not blink. I did not move the phone an inch. I offered 0 quarter. His trembling right hand came up. His thick, liver-spotted thumb hovered over the digital keyboard. He tapped the glass. Click, click, click. The artificial sound of the digital keyboard cut through the dead silence of the church hall. The sound of his heavy, panicked breathing mixed with the tapping. 50 pairs of eyes watched him type his own confession. I was wrong. My daughter is innocent. I failed her. "Hit send," I commanded. His thumb hesitated, shaking over the blue button. Then he pressed it. The status updated immediately. The lie was dead. The carefully crafted optics were permanently shattered. I pulled the phone back and slipped it into my pocket. I turned my back on him. In the far corner of the hall, sitting on the floor near the coat rack, was a cardboard donation box from his house. I walked over. I reached inside and pulled out a heavy faded cotton quilt. My mother's quilt. Resting beneath it was her worn leather Bible. I tucked them both securely under my arm. I walked back down the center aisle. I did not look back at the broken man standing frozen by the coffee urns. I pushed open the double doors and stepped out into the crisp, cold morning air. Not a single person tried to stop me. 3 days later. My apartment was dead quiet. The afternoon sun was going down, casting long gray shadows across the cheap carpeting. I sat on the edge of my mattress. I had my mother's heavy cotton quilt wrapped tightly around my shoulders. The weight of the fabric grounded me. On the wooden nightstand, my cell phone vibrated. The screen lit up the dark corner of the room. Incoming call, Arthur Cole. He had called 30 times in 3 days. I had ignored every single one. This time I reached out and picked it up. I pressed the cold glass against my ear. "Hello," I said, flat, empty. "Bella." His voice cracked on the other end of the line. It was hollow, whiny. The sound of a man sitting entirely alone in a large empty house with the curtains drawn. "How long? Please tell me. How long until everything goes back to normal?" I ran my calloused fingertips over the raised embroidery of the old quilt. I felt the thick, durable thread. I realized something profound in that exact fraction of a second. The burning anger was completely gone. The sharp sting of his betrayal had finally burned itself out. There was absolutely nothing left inside my chest but cold, hardened steel. "You lost a position in society," I said. My voice was steady and absolute. It was the sound of a soldier taking her finger off the trigger. The war was officially over. "I lost a father. When you understand why I am hurt instead of why you are embarrassed, call me back." I pulled the phone away from my ear. I pressed the red button. The digital connection severed. I tossed the phone onto the mattress. I did not wait for it to ring again. It would not matter if it did. The ultimate revenge of a soldier is realizing you no longer require the approval of a coward. The heavy rusted chains of blood and toxic obligations snapped. I was completely free. If this story resonated with you, hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and drop the word freedom in the comments. Thank you for listening. See you in the next one.